Hello, fellow humans. We accept that capitalism is an economic system that is supposed to serve the needs of humans, but it is also understood as a mechanism for wealth accumulation or for an efficient allocation of resources through market mechanisms, or even as a backbone for liberal democracy. You know, the kind of democracy that is practiced in developed countries and in many developing countries. When people talk about capitalism, they may refer to very different things, which may lead us to misguided beliefs that capitalism is the only viable economic system or that the only alternative is Soviet Union style socialism. Is the private ownership of the means of production a cause for the behavior of economic agents, or just a description, a symptom of some deeper cause? Is there something about the market system that causes economic agents to behave in a certain way, or are markets a symptom of some underlying causes? In fact, we did have markets long before capitalism. How about working for a wage for a capitalist, thus creating the class relations that Karl Marx talked about? Is this what capitalism is about, or is this a symptom of some deeper relation? Why do we have employers, employees, and capitalists in the first place? Why this particular arrangement of putting people into these specific groups instead of some other arrangement? What really interests me are the causal forces or doctrines that make capitalism do what it does. What exactly make people behave as they do when they act as economic agents of capitalism? Workers, managers, executives, owners of capital, investors, consumers, and producers alike, they behave according to some rules that are imposed by the system itself. They're incentivized to make money, accumulate wealth, and use the market system to satisfy their needs or signal their social status. In this video, I will talk about the second force that drives capitalism, the doctrine of dispossession. It is the force or principle that links property to capital. According to this doctrine, capitalism transforms all sorts of property into capital for the purpose of making more capital and more profit for the owners of capital. Let's look at three kinds of dispossession and see what it would look like if we just phased them out. Dispossession of land, dispossession of personal data, dispossession of identity, also known as alienation. When the indigenous nations in Canada fought against the development of the Coastal GasLink pipeline in British Columbia, it was because the pipeline was crossing their traditional territory. This territory was dispossessed from them without consent and with the use of physical force of armed federal police. The courts also sided with the owner of the pipeline. So did the federal government. If the doctrine of dispossession was phased out, there will be no pipelines on any territory without the consent of its residents. Fossil fuels will have a hard time being extracted any longer. In fact, dispossession of land started in the 1500s in England, where peasants were owning the land on which they worked. The ruling regional lords were not happy with that. They decided to take over the land itself, kick out the peasants, and force them to work for a living with very little pay. Fast forward to today, the amount of land that is appropriated by the global north from the global south is roughly the size of Brazil each year. Mind you, this is not a new area of the size of Brazil that is appropriated every year, but the same equivalent area all over the world. That amount of land is used for what is known as net appropriation for the benefit of the global north. Land grabs are still a very real thing today. In Africa, this amounts to taking away dignity from the poor. It is robbing people of their core meaning of life. If the dispossession of land stopped, all this transfer of wealth from the global south to the global north would also stop, leaving the poor and developing countries in a position to regain their dignity and have a chance at real development. Next, dispossession of personal data is a more subtle process. This is what Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism. She writes, surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free, raw material for translation into behavioral data. Although some of these data are applied to product or service improvement, the rest are declared as a proprietary behavioral surplus, fed into advanced manufacturing processes known as machine intelligence, and fabricated into prediction products that anticipate what you will do now, soon, and later. Finally, these prediction products are traded in a new kind of marketplace for behavioral predictions that I call behavioral futures markets. Surveillance capitalists have grown immensely wealthy from these trading operations, for many companies are eager to lay bets on our future behavior. The claim from Facebook, Google, X, Amazon, and all major commercial platforms is that our personal data that we deliver on their platforms does not belong to us. It belongs to them, because we agree in the terms and conditions to allow these companies to use our personal data so they can increase their capital. This is a huge and very bold claim that wants to separate personal data from the person. We can argue personal data is an important component of the identity of a person. If you take away and sell it or manipulate it, it is literally encroaching on the identity of the person. That is deeply immoral. If a person loses control over their personal data, what is left to define that person in a social context? Ending the dispossession of personal data would mean nothing less than making people full owners of their personal data and giving them full authority to decide what to do with it, assuming full consent. Denmark wants to introduce an initiative to better protect citizens from the use of their personal data in deep fakes. A corresponding national law is to be submitted to the Danish parliament before the summer break. It could then be put to a vote there in the fall. We should go even further and socialize all commercial social media platforms and remove the profit motive from them. Making them social utilities will remove the doctrine of dispossession and create a social digital democracy where civil discourse will be much easier to maintain. Third, dispossession of identity is something that can happen even outside social media platforms. It is often associated with the notion of alienation, which are the feelings of estrangement or disconnection that people experience when they feel distant from their workplaces, social environment, or community. In his theory of alienation, Karl Marx talked about how workers lose the sense of control over their own lives, they lose the ability to think freely at the workplace, and to share the ownership of the products made with their labor. In this way, capital is robbing people of their mental capacity to explore the freedom of personal development. We no longer own ourselves fully. We are enslaving ourselves, sometimes willingly, to serve as capital for someone else who wants to make a profit. If the dispossession of identity was phased out, we would feel more agency, more connection to our own selves, including at the workplace. Having a sense of purpose in life, being able to pursue personal growth while seeking our full natural potential requires a lot of social agency, which is the capability to enact change in the real world. If we do not have space to grow in society, learn and enrich ourselves, we would never know if we ever reached our potential. This is what dispossession does to our minds and souls. It diminishes this space for social exploration and keeps us way below our potential. These three examples for the doctrine of dispossession barely scratch the surface of what is going on. Capitalism has been able to reinvent itself and resist because the doctrine of dispossession has not been weakened. It changed shape over the centuries and even the name. In the early days of settler colonialism, it was known as the doctrine of discovery. This is how capitalism has survived 2 world wars and numerous financial crises. It kept the doctrines in place. Capitalism will continue to survive as long as this doctrine and the other two continue to remain unchallenged. In the next video, we will look at the doctrine of hierarchies and imagine how the workplace would change if we added democracy to our economy. Thank you for watching. To help me continue this research, which is part of a plan that spans several years, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Subscribe to the channel to help with the algorithm and, of course, increase the peace.